What unfolded that night was something I could never have anticipated. It quickly became one of the most surreal and unforgettable nights of my life. The evening began like any other tranquil night at home. After dinner, the familiar hum of the dishwasher filled the background, and the old wooden floorboards creaked softly as the house settled into its usual stillness. I had no way of knowing that in just a few hours, my entire perspective about my life, my family, and even myself would be irreversibly altered. My name is Peter. Up until a short time ago, I genuinely believed I had everything under control. At 40 years old, I've worked hard to build a modest but fulfilling life with my wife, Laura, married for 19 years. We've faced our challenges like any couple, but I always considered our relationship strong and resilient. We have 2 children, Clara, who's away at college, and James, our 19-year-old son, who still lives at home while attending community college. James has always been a quiet, introspective young man. Laura and I used to muse that he was the calm to Clara's storm, where her fiery energy was a stark contrast to his reserved demeanor. When he wasn't reading or tinkering away at his latest project, he preferred the solitude of his room. However, as James grew older, I began noticing subtle shifts. His once shy smiles turned into fleeting glances, and every so often I'd catch him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, almost as if he was searching for something unspoken. I chalked it up to normal growing pains and left him to navigate things in his own time. Laura was out of town for work on one of her frequent trips. That evening, it was just James and me at home. We had dinner together, and I tried to engage him in conversation, asking about school and the 3D model he'd been working on for weeks. Although he answered politely, his responses were brief. His eyes darted between mine and the floor, almost nervously. "You doing okay, bud?" I asked. "You seem a little quiet tonight." He gave me a small smile before replying, "Yeah, just tired." I didn't press further. James had always been reserved, and I figured he'd open up when or if he wanted to. Later that night, as I crawled into bed, Laura's side felt emptier than usual. I missed her presence, the warmth she brought even. When she was fast asleep, the reassurance of her quiet breathing beside me. Sleep came reluctantly, and close to midnight, I stirred awake at the sound of faint footsteps downstairs. At first, I dismissed it as the old house creaking as usual. But then, I heard it again, measured, deliberate steps that broke through the silence. My heart began to race as instinct urged me out of bed. Entering the hallway, I quickly noticed that James' bedroom door was wide open. He wasn't inside, assuming he must be awake downstairs. I turned off the hallway lights and tried to convince myself it was nothing out of the ordinary. Lying back down, I closed my eyes and felt the familiar hum of the house slowly pulling me towards sleep. Sometime later, I awoke again, this time to the faintest creak of my bedroom door being pushed ajar. Squinting into the muted darkness, my pulse quickened. The air felt tense in the stillness of my room, broken only by my own shallow breathing. A faint rustle of fabric hinted at movement as someone stepped closer. Half asleep and disoriented, I mumbled my wife's name, Laura. Perhaps she had come home unexpectedly to surprise me after her trip was cut short, but no response came. Then the mattress dipped slightly under added weight. Someone had sat at its edge. For reasons I couldn't explain, my mind grasped onto familiarity when a light touch landed on my leg. A gesture so reminiscent of Laura placing her hand on me during nights of closeness or comfort, but it wasn't quite right. The touch lingered too cautiously. It lacked her effortless ease. Slowly opening my eyes to investigate further, pale moonlight spilled between the slats of our blinds, and what I saw froze my blood cold. It wasn't Laura sitting at the edge of my bed. It was James. James. My voice betrayed my confusion and growing unease. "What are you doing?" He didn't speak at first. His hand remained lightly resting on my leg. The shadows obscured part of his face, while his uneasy expression faintly mirrored my own unsettled state. His lips parted slightly as if he wanted to say something, but no words came. "Is everything okay?" I asked more firmly, while sitting up fully now, with tension coursing through me. I didn't mean whether to knock or walk away. The hesitation gnawed at me, but staying silent felt worse. Before I could overthink it further, I knocked lightly, the sound barely audible. Moments passed like stretched-out minutes before I heard shuffling behind the door. "Come in," James called out, his voice muted. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room was dim, curtains drawn tight against the daylight. He looked up from where he sat on the edge of his bed, his posture tense, yet guarded. "Hey," I said softly, trying not to disrupt the fragile atmosphere. "I hope I'm not intruding." He shook his head but didn't respond right away. His gaze drifted to the floor again, and I noticed the way his hands fidgeted with the frayed corner of a pillow. "I just wanted to check in," I continued, taking a step closer but careful not to invade the space he seemed to cling to. "About last night. About everything, really," he sighed deeply, finally lifting his eyes to meet mine. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his tone carrying a blend of guilt and vulnerability. "I shouldn't have bothered you like that. It came out of nowhere." "It's okay," I reassured him with gentle conviction. "You can talk to me any time, James. You're not bothering me." I paused, searching for the right words. I want to be there for you." His expression softened despite the lingering uncertainty in his eyes. "It's just, this house feels so big when it's just us here. Ever since Mom left and Claire's been gone, it's like there's a hollow space everywhere." I sat beside him, keeping my movements unhurried, giving him time to adjust to my presence. "I know," I said quietly. "It's been hard for me too." He exhaled a shaky breath, as if those words gave him permission to admit his feelings with less reluctance. "I miss them both so much," he confessed, his voice cracking slightly at the mention of their names. "I know," I repeated, resting a comforting hand on his back. "And there's no shame in that missing them doesn't make you weak, James." For a while, we sat there in silence. It wasn't awkward. It felt necessary a time to process the sadness we'd both been carrying alone and perhaps silently shared all along. When he eventually spoke again, his tone was steadier, more intentional. "Thanks for saying that, for staying." I smiled faintly and nudged his shoulder lightly, hoping to inject a bit of warmth into the moment. "Of course, you don't have to face this alone. We'll figure it out together." The shift between us felt subtle, yet profound, as though acknowledging our mutual struggles had bridged an unspoken gap. For the first time since those restless nights, it felt like the house wasn't so empty after all, like its walls were holding something small but vital: connection. Walking away initially felt like the easier choice, but instead, I gently knocked on the door. "Can we talk?" I asked, making an effort to keep my voice steady. There was a brief pause before I heard footsteps approaching. When the door opened, his usual guarded expression was replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. "Hey," he greeted quietly, stepping aside to let me in. I entered the room, noticing its neat and orderly appearance, though the atmosphere felt hesitant, almost fragile. He motioned for me to sit, and I complied, even though my anxious thoughts were telling me to turn back. "I just wanted to check in," I began cautiously. His expression shifted slightly at my words. "About last night," he said with a faint wince. "I'm sorry. I know it was awkward. Shouldn't have." "It's okay," I interrupted gently. "I'm not upset. I just want to understand what's going on." "I want to tell you something," he said, fidgeting with his hands nervously. "I guess I just feel really alone sometimes. And when the house is quiet, it's like the walls are closing in. Even when you're here." His words hit harder than I had anticipated. I'd always tried to be there for him in every way I could, but hearing that he still felt alone while I was around stung more than I expected. "I'm so sorry if I've made you feel that way," I said softly. "You're not alone. I'm here for you always." He nodded slightly but kept his eyes lowered. "I know," he replied quietly. It's not the same." I hesitated before asking, "Hey, what do you mean by that?" He looked uncertain before finally responding, his voice low and raw with honesty that carried an unexpected weight. "It's hard to explain. I just want to feel close to someone really close, and I don't know how to do that." His candor filled the room with an intensity I wasn't prepared for. I didn't have the right words or a clear response, but one thing became clear amid my confusion. I wasn't going to let him carry this loneliness anymore. "James." I started cautiously, trying to tread gently around emotions that felt volatile, even to me. I think you're confused. It's normal to feel. I'm not confused, he interrupted firmly, his gaze suddenly meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. I know what I feel. I know it's not normal. But I can't help it. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come out. What followed was a heavy silence, his confession stirring emotions too complex for either of us to name aloud. The weight of it pressed down on both of us like storm clouds gathering overhead, tense and unrelenting. The rest of the evening was a strained effort at normality. We had dinner, speaking of light, things like school and work as though nothing had changed. Yet the unspoken tension lingered beneath every word, every glance that lingered too long when no one spoke. His gaze followed me silently when I turned away, leaving me unsettled in ways I couldn't fully articulate when I went to bed that night. His voice, the vulnerability in it, continued replaying in my thoughts as if on a loop. Unable to sleep, I found myself walking down the hall toward his room without consciously deciding to do so. He was still awake when I whispered his name from the doorway. He didn't answer immediately, but when he did speak, it was quiet and deliberate. "Would you like me to leave?" "No," I said softly. "Would you? Would you like to sit with me for a little while?" After a moment's hesitation, he nodded slowly and followed me into my room. As he sat on the edge of the bed with his hands resting uneasily on his knees, we remained silent for what felt like hours as the air between us thickened with all the things left unsaid. "Please," he murmured finally, breaking the silence with trembling words. "Please don't leave right now." I swallowed hard as conflicting emotions swirled within me, leaving an ache in their place. "All right," I replied quietly, lying down beside him, but keeping a deliberate distance between us as my own uncertainties clouded over everything else. Yet even through my confusion and doubt, one thought struck me with glaring certainty. This wasn't over yet. The atmosphere was still charged, but in a different way, not dangerous, just unspoken. Finally, I broke the silence, saying, "Let's not lose ourselves in this. Not now." He met my gaze again, and for the first time neither of us said a word. The silence wasn't empty, though. It was heavy with everything we couldn't bring ourselves to express. I can't explain every detail, but the moment was intense, emotional, sensitive. From his side, I sensed a trace of hurt, too. He seemed to take his role in the conversation more seriously than I'd expected. I could tell from the way he said my name after I had finished speaking. When it ended, we just sat there, steeping in the quiet, both unsure of exactly what had unfolded. "You okay, son?" I asked. "Yes, Dad. Don't worry about me. I just need a moment. I'll go to the bathroom, and then maybe we can just get some rest." That's the last thing I vividly remember from that night. I think I drifted off while he was still gone. The next morning, I woke early, my thoughts immediately returning to the previous night's exchange. Halfway through my coffee, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Without even looking up, I already knew it was James. His presence filled the room before he said a word. "Morning," he greeted softly, his voice timid. "Morning, coffee's on the counter." He nodded and poured himself a cup. For a moment, we just stood there engulfed by silence, the air between us dense like a storm brewing. Finally, I set my mug down and turned to him. "James, we need to talk." His shoulders tensed. "About last night?" he asked quietly. "About everything," I replied. "I need to understand what's going on with you and with us." He hesitated for a moment, looking at the floor before admitting, "I don't know. I've just been carrying this around for so long, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. I know I didn't handle it right, but I can't ignore it either." His words hit me hard. I wanted to tell him he was mistaken or perhaps just confused, but one look in his eyes told me this wasn't something fleeting. "Whatever you're feeling, it's complicated," I said carefully. "You can't just act without thinking." "I know," he whispered. "But that doesn't make it go away." The silence that followed was even heavier this time. Every word felt perilous. I wanted to ease his pain, to promise him things would be okay, but I didn't know how. This was uncharted territory for both of us. It felt like one wrong move could break everything apart. The rest of the day unfolded awkwardly. James stayed mostly in his room while I busied myself with chores and errands to keep my mind distracted. But every thought looped back to him. His vulnerability from the night before lingered in my head and made my chest tighten every time. I recalled his eyes brimming with emotion. By evening, as I sat alone in the living room with a glass of water in hand, the quiet settled thick around me. That's when he appeared at the doorway, hesitant yet determined, hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Can I sit?" he asked softly. I nodded, and he came over, leaving a small gap between us on the couch. After a prolonged pause, he finally spoke. "I'm sorry for making things awkward. I didn't mean to, but I didn't know how else to handle it." "It's okay," I murmured gently. "We'll figure this out." James looked up at me then, his gaze raw and honest. "Do you still care about me?" His voice cracked slightly as he spoke, the question barely louder than a whisper. "Of course I do," I said immediately, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're my son. Nothing will ever change that." Some of the tension seemed to leave his body at my touch. "I just want us to be close again," he confessed shakily. I missed that. His words struck something deep within me, something painful yet hopeful. Without hesitation, I pulled him into a tight embrace. "I'm here, James. I'm not going anywhere." For a brief moment, wrapped in that hug, felt like we might actually be okay, like we could start healing and mending what we'd lost. When he finally pulled back, his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he said quietly. The lump in my throat made it impossible to speak. Instead, I squeezed his hand firmly in response. "James, we'll get through this together." He gave me a small smile, tinged with hope. "I know we will." As he walked away, a newfound sense